Okay, hello there, everybody, and I hope all of you are having a good day. And well, if you pardon me for the moment, now I have to specify a few things because we've talked previously about Chris being up to no good, Chris doing things that no ordinary or sane person would have done. But now we have to sort of move into one of those topics that's, well, quite serious. And I'm going to explain to you why it is because I think there are very few things. Debt for me, guys, is a cancer. It is something that refuses to die. It is something that will live and continue to live and grow until it does one thing. It eats you alive. It destroys your brain. It destroys your very soul. You will even resort, ladies and gentlemen, to selling your soul to clear your debt, which don't do by the way, guys, because as everyone knows, once you've sold your soul, you're never getting it back. Most people, however, would consider the idea that Chris, insofar as, well, being Chris is concerned, has long since steadfastly refused the idea of trying to sell his soul. Some say that it's neither good nor bad, but I think the time for thinking about whether or not what is good or bad, even at this stage, is long over. Because, like most people, when they get into debt, there is sort of like a lingering ambition stuck somewhere in the back of their minds that suggests the idea that not only can they get out of it easily, because that's another thing I forgot to mention, is that once you're in debt, it is a bugger to get out of it. And every day, every moment that passes by and you do not get out of debt, your hole is becoming deeper and deeper and deeper. And trying to escape is harder and harder and harder. It's not impossible, but it becomes increasingly more difficult. But then Chris has shares the other delusion that, well, everything is completely fine, which is almost the sole disposition that all people who are delusional suffer from, is the belief that not only is everything fine, but they are completely on top of the world. For Chris, however, well, he simply has to face facts, because on paper, much like the debt he's acquired, it doesn't sound good. I would say it's the sort of thing that will keep people awake at night. But let's get into why that is. How the hell Quick is going to pay for all of that? Twitter user Tao of Mao won on viewing the result of Chris's third debt lawsuit. A bit at a time. Do not judge me, Mao. It is wrong to judge others by outdated information and financial shit. This is Chris's response, by the way, who has been sued for non-payment many times since. So it's not really that outdated, but, well, considering that Chris has always been, again, because Chris is extremely delusional, he will try and suggest the idea that, again, being on top of the world means that it's pointless to say where they've come from, except for the fact that Chris is still exactly where he came from, 14 Branch Lane Court, and has subsequently only been removed as a means of force. So Chris literally only moved by a means of absolute brute force. And because if it didn't happen, Chris would have just still been there, and you guys know that as well. Debt is anything owed by one party to another, such as money owed to a creditor. Due to their mutual laziness and propensities towards hoarding, Barbara and Chris are both heavily in debt. Both have been taken to court for their failure to pay debts on multiple occasions, Barb 3 times and Chris 11 times, including 4 garnishment hearing cases against Chris. As of April 2023, according to court records, Barbara owes over $20,000, while Chris owes over $10,000, to say nothing of the $115,000 second mortgage on 14 Branch Lane Court. So, This is mostly just going to be sort of like analyzing more than any, or at least looking over the sources of the debts, and well, you know what, even reading this stuff is probably going to keep me up at night because, well, a lot of people are very, very concerned when it comes to financial difficulties, and the stress it places on people is absolutely immeasurable. And I'm almost doing this, guys, for your benefit, because this probably is going to include a lot of other things people do not want to hear. But the sad truth is that I would say, at least in the UK right now, I think it's almost like 1 in 10 people are in debt. Maybe it could be as little as £100, maybe as little as an entire pound, but somebody owes somebody something eventually. That's not really based on anything, I must say. It's a bit of a baseless thing to say, but, well, how do I know it's not worse than that? You tell me. This table summarizes various debts between Chris and Bob. Keep in mind that these are only amounts found by Christorians via Chris's online posts and Virginia District Court public records. The actual amount outstanding may be lower than this, because Chris reported on the 2nd of September 2020 that they were making repayments on some of their debt. Well, bloody hell, that's nice. On the 30th of November 2016, Chris started a Patreon with a goal of $250,000. He estimated $200,000 to pay off the mortgage and other debts, plus an extra £50,000 for himself. Just because. You know, most people would argue that $250,000, $250,000, is relatively excessive to pay up, but then to pay off not only the mortgage, but including like other debts, because, well, how do we know for certain the other debts don't accumulate or at the exact same level of the second mortgage? So I'm sort of looking at that and thinking to myself, well, first of all, would you pay someone to live in 14 Branch Lane Court? I doubt it. Maybe if every single thing in that house was gone, the walls had been replastered, new fresh wallpaper had been put in, a completely new carpet had been set up in every single room, it had been steam cleaned, the windows had all been replaced, the tiling had been completely scrubbed, the gutters and the drains had been cleared. Anything to get rid of the smell, probably more than anything. In fact, I'm almost going to say, just for... Do you think it's because of the amount of animals and dead animals that sort of frequent the yard is where the smell comes from? Or, well, it's probably more down to the unsanitary the hell of 14 Branch Lane Court. But let's get to it. Okay, date, debt incurred, blank, debtor, Bob, item, mortgage payments to Ceteris Incorporated, amount $115,000. Notes: mortgage 14 Branch Lane Court for collateral to pay credit card debt, $900 per month, using money from Chris's tugboat. 24th of September 2014, Chris, loan for Sonshu, creditor is Chrysler Capital, $9,000. This is the same car, by the way, that Chris whined and complained about because he actually had to pay insurance, and he decided more out of a sense of feeling than any particular cause, considering Chris was trying to start a hustle, if you will, of selling Sonichu medallions and little arts, crafts sort of deals on eBay on commission, and yet Chris was, well, extremely haphazard in running a business. And it's, curiously enough, one of my... I like that part where we talked about like Chris and his business, because, well, it's not a good idea, guys, to start off with a bad reputation, do nothing but justify or to exacerbate that bad reputation, and then immediately decide you want to go and get yourself a new sporty Ford Focus for $9,000. Well, this is more for the loan from Chrysler Capital, but anyway, moving on. 16th of March 2016 including to the 14th of September 2016. Barbara. Court judgments for debt, see next section for details. $21,306.74. 24th of August 2017 to the present. Chris. Court judgments for debt. $11,606.15. Meaning that this has been going on for 8 years now and it's still not been fully paid. 1st of March 2016. PS4 purchase via fingerhut.com, $540. Some would say that that's technically, since Chris paid the full price for that anyway, that shouldn't really be included on this list. It would only really be included on this list if Chris decided he was going to pay this in installments. But then again, probably not even then, because the interest they sort of like charge for stuff like that, they'll squeeze Chris for maybe 5% more. Perhaps. I'm not entirely sure if they can do that, but $540 even for a PS4 is a bit much, if you ask me. 16th of April 2016. Chris. Payday loan, not counting the extremely high interest rates, $3,000. Bear in mind, this only lists this they don't include whether or not this is a direct, if this is the interest put onto it, but I'm sure there's got to be an interest put onto this. So really, it's more like $3,400 or possibly $3,500. Yeah, by the way, guys, if it's also been said before, never, ever, ever go to payday loan companies. They are sharks in the water, hungry for blood. And they literally, there is no distinction between these guys whatsoever, between them and people who will literally, just like I said, these guys are just as cancerous as debt. Because the second they get on your case, they will never leave you alone. Even when you're like 300 miles into the mainland where there's no possibility of sharks getting to you, oh, they'll find a way. Total, $160,000, $452.89. That's quite an outstanding loan amount, I must say. Court cases. 19th of February 2016, judgment date 16th of March 2016, Discovery Bank, Barbara, warrant in debt, $4,706.93 with no interest, and they had to pay a court fee of $56. This is also something you're going to be seeing a lot, because these do make it to court. There is a fee to pay for these. In fact, when Barbara had a car accident in 2021, she, outside of the $36 she had to pay, not only in terms of being found guilty, she also had to pay $56 just for the court fees. So, inevitably, guys, taking this to court is probably, it covers more than the actual fine of the accident. Although considering that Barbara also had to go because she suffered a concussion and 2 broken ribs during the accident. Medical, insurance and, going to hospital is probably going to put at least another $60 on top of that. Maybe even more. Anyway, 4th of August 2016, Capital One, Barbara, warrant in debt, $15,906.99 with no interest and a court fee of $56. Next, Mariner Finance, Chris, warrant in debt, blankety, blank, and the case just was dismissed. We have but then again, considering it's never really been specified or what record there is about what Chris owed, well, maybe there was nothing to owe. Maybe Mariner just sort of, I don't know, maybe they got Chris mixed up with somebody else. Which would also explain why this case only lasted like 3.5 weeks. Anyway, second round sub, Chris, warrant in debt, $2,467.63 with a 6% interest rate and $55 in court fees. Failed to maintain payments, creditor filed for garnishment. So, I'm pretty sure garnishment means that, I've actually forgot. I will look into it in a bit because I'm pretty sure garnishment means that they had to like take away stuff so that well, it's not really because that's like repossessing, that isn't it? No, it's not. It doesn't count as repossessing. It's like when they take stuff away, which which adds up to payment and stuff like that. But well, then again, considering fail to make payments, I think that's a little bit more serious. Anyway, Midland funding, Chris, warrant in debt, $2,777.90 with a 6% interest rate and another $55 in fees. Notes, failed to maintain payments, creditor filed for garnishment. Meanwhile, and are you starting to also notice a pattern that a lot of these are actually very, very closely together? Mostly Chris, by the way. Because we go from July to about 14 months later, to a month later, to 7 months later, and then we got to another month, and this really spirals out of control. Portfolio recovery associates, Chris, warrant in debt, $1,079.08, with the $55 in core fees, no interest, and eyewitness account of the hearing. And oh, is this the one where Chris literally played with his fidget spinner? No sign of the minivan. More recently, I hear Chris sighing, squealing. Oh yeah, that's right. He just makes noises and just starts acting like a child. We're taking a break so I can make a little noise if I want. Yeah. One thing you're going to be also hearing of a little bit more in this article is the fact that, well, as time goes on, you'll also start to notice a pattern of Chris feeling rather self-entitled, if you will, to the fact that he's even being dragged to these proceedings in the first place. And Chris has all the aptitude of a 6-year-old child in a 42-year-old man's body. You may have heard me say that a few times during these articles, but it really does have to be said. I don't even feel like Chris has the cognitive ability not only to comprehend how much debt he has accumulated, but for the fact that none of this makes anybody look good. The only people that make this look good is the fact that, well, it gives a bit of a brighter image about the image of Chris shines even brighter on everything else, because this is a lot of things coming to the surface. I mean, just in 2019 alone, look, 1, 2, 3, 4 court cases for debt for Chris just in 2019. Speaking of that, Midland funding, Chris, garnishment, closed early, result dismissed, no funds. Also in 2019, well, yeah, right here. Second round sub, Chris, garnishment, closed early, result, other. I've never heard a result come under other before. That's other is when you put when you tick an application form about do you associate as either this, that, or the other. Meanwhile, 30th of January 2020, Jefferson Capital Systems, warrant in debt, $2,773.56 with a 6% interest rate. And these two come under the same bubble because these were on the same day, by the way, with Portfolio Recovery Associates, $905.36 with no interest rate, well, at least not available. Delayed from 18th of March 2020 due to COVID-19 precautions, heard on 2nd of September after 2 postponements. 30th of March, so 2 months later. This one actually comes under Barbara, so that's a little bit of warrant in debt, $692.82, 6% interest rate, $61 in court costs. Hearing scheduled for 19th of May 2021, continue to 14th of July 2021. Well, I'm going to assume for one moment that Chris decided that, well, Barbara, you look like you've Barbie-chan, you've probably had a very tough day. How about we have an early massage, just so you can forget about what's happening, including probably right now. Sad but true. Probably. 19th of August, and by the way, This is when, whilst Chris was in the clink, by the way. 19th of August 2022, Portfolio Recovery Associates, garnishment. Hearing scheduled for 5th of October 2022, which was indefinitely postponed. And finally, at least to the present day, 10th of March 2023, Midland Funding, Chris, garnishment. Hearing scheduled for April 2023. Result dismissed. No funds. Total, Barbara, 3 cases, $21,306.74, with nothing, on the interest. Chris, 11 cases, $11,606.15, in $481.15 just in court. Is this meant to be in court? I'm pretty sure it's meant to be just in court fees. It certainly adds up, I suppose. Total, is it? Oh no, it's the interest. Okay, never mind. Total, 14 cases, $32,912.89, with an interest rate that comes up to $481.15. And as you can see right here, this is the gallery about all of the cases going to the Greene County District Court. And there's a lot to this as well, by the way. And speaking of a lot to it, the causes of Chris's debt. So, how did Chris get this way? Well, it's very simple. Chris spends money the second it comes into his hands, and Chris has no sense of self-control whatsoever. That's the very easy way to say it, but there is a little bit more to it, and just so we can keep this going on for about another 5 or so minutes. Credit cards. That Chris's parents permitted him to acquire several credit cards is very surprising, but the foolishness with which he uses them won't surprise anybody at all. As of February of 2009, Chris had managed to rack up $2,000 worth of debt. At the time of Mumble, $1,000 of that sum came from the PSN store. By the way, Chris will also buy games that he never plays and buys microtransactions for games he also never plays. Please let that sink in, because that you're starting to wonder where this is all starting to come from. But for his bill for PSN downloads increased by the day, and had even stolen his parents' credit cards to use when his own were maxed out. According to an email Chris sent to Vivian G by January of 2010, his debt was around $3,500, and had apparently been higher at some point in the intervening time. By that point, Chris's debt had gotten so out of hand that Bob was forced to step in, making Chris reduce and manage on his spending, and forcing Chris to make regular payments to pay off his outstanding debt. Chris, thoughtless and uninterested in the fact that unpaid credit card debts occurs severe interest, had historically made payments in the smallest installments possible. I suppose the only thing I can say to that is that, well, what do you expect when your son is a lazy slob who's never worked a day in his life? How else do you expect he's going to get the money? At some point, Bob paid off Chris's credit card debt and took payment in installments out of the tugboat in compensation. This foolish act of parental financial enabling allowed Chris to avoid the immediate consequences of his gross financial irresponsibility. Well, here's the thing about this, is that it's not so much Chris avoided, it's rather Chris should have learned fine well that this is the sort of thing that won't happen forever, because people are not made of money. But Chris doesn't really seem to understand that. And resulted in Chris learning nothing about how to manage his own finances, reinforcing Chris's attitude that he should be able to do anything he wants and not suffer any negative consequences. Like I said at the beginning, Chris feels like he's on top of the world most of the time. But even to that effect, nobody stays on top forever. Not surprisingly, it only took Chris a few short months to land himself in more financial trouble. Chris had not only acquired a MasterCard charge account through Best Buy, But as of the second week of August 2010, Chris had predictably used it to land himself in yet more debt and had been laden with fees for bouncing a card payment. Chris had acquired the Best Buy charge card without his parents' permission. He only told them about it receiving 2 bounced check fees that showed up on his bank statement, which his father was actively monitoring. In true Chris fashion, he tried to repay the minimum balance each month. When he was forced to reveal the debt to his parents, Bob was obviously less than thrilled. He promptly took control of Chris's bank account as well as his credit cards. From that point until Bob's death, he received only an allowance in the form of Visa gift cards, leaving him unable to accrue any more debt at a short time. At the time, the prospect of not being able to blow his welfare on frivolities stressed him out. Curiously enough, even in his private communications with Jackie, Chris claimed that the overdraft fees that gave away the existence of the card to Bob were the work of trolls. Elsewhere in the conversations, however, he recounts other instances of getting carried away and accidentally overdrawing his bank account, suggesting that he was just using the trolls as a handy scapegoat for his own mistakes. Bob, delusional and in the throes of some sort of conspiracy paranoia involving the staff and patrons of the game place, claimed that it was most likely Michael Snyder, who had hacked Chris's credit card and checking accounts. Bob promptly salvaged Chris's credit rating when he pulled all of his prior credit card debt at once, but he angrily claimed Chris ruined it with the Best Buy debt, certainly true, and in disturbingly Chris-like fashion, seemed to use this damning information to try to make Chris's latest brush with the law seem petty in comparison. After Bob's death, Chris took back control of his credit cards, as he learned nothing due to Bob's enabling. Chris quickly accrued more debt. Unverified information on Chris's credit card debt was leaked on the Quickie forums on the 4th of June 2014. It was revealed that Chris had at least 5 active credit cards, with at least $7,600 in combined credit limit. Of the 5 known active cards, at least 4 were revealed to be maxed out, with at least $7,400 in unpaid debt between the 5 cards. It was estimated that the minimum payment on Chris's known debt was at least $220 a month, and it was revealed that the only reason that Chris had been able to obtain the credit card that he had was that, historically, he had almost always at least paid the minimum payment each month, although it was implied that he rarely, if ever, paid more than the minimum. In June 2016, Chris has got a card limit raise for one of his credit cards. Chris immediately, and I mean immediately, blew his bonus on Transformers toys, only to later beg for money over Facebook, while blaming his mother for impulsively spending more on their overdue bills than the minimum amount done. And bear in mind, this is the post about Chris bragging about buying Transformers, and this is Chris complaining about it 9 minutes later. You can't make this stuff up, I swear. Nearing the end of the 2010s, Chris began to ignore his minimum debt payments, causing multiple collection agencies to file lawsuits against him. Ali Hirschberg, a financial enabler, tried to help by sending Chris free money, but Chris simply spent the money on entertainment such as printing up a line of personal Twilight Sparkle's secret shipfic folder cards instead. Chris nothing short of completely confusing priorities. Payday loans. In early 2016, Arthur Spatchcock discovered that Chris had taken out a payday loan for $3,000. Chris borrowed $3,000. What he did with it's hazy, sure, but how do you think he bought all those Lego sets for Lego Dimensions? A payday loan charges extremely high rates, usually at least 400%, which does not bode well for Chris, due to his habit of only paying back minimal amounts at a time. Looking ahead. At present, Chris is basically immune to the consequences of his own debts, until one day when basically Chris would have borrowed money from the wrong people and literally will get himself into some very hot water. Don't believe me? Well, considering we do realize which person we're talking about, right? The monthly tugboat technically cannot be garnished. Money from financial enablers is squirreled away in PayPal or spent too quickly for the court to note, and his debts are unsecured as he does not have collateral in his name. The Big Island, Virginia house is in the name of Caden. Yeah, so I know a lot of people will straight up say for the record that most people will think that Chris being too careless here, too obsessive there, too irresponsible here, and too smug over there. But personally, guys, let's not forget the fact that on top of everything we know about Chris, and and this includes a lot of the things that people just straight up can't stand about Chris, this, however, is one of those cases where real world consequences will actually catch up to Chris. And I'm not just talking about debt, I'm talking about, well, Chris will get into even worse trouble because of this. Because this isn't just the stuff that will just go away, because what's to stop Chris from going to court for the 12th time? What is it that's actually kind of preventing Chris from actually getting into even more trouble? You tell me, because I can't think of anything at this moment. The only thing that's possibly preventing Chris at this point is whatever influence Flutter is having over Chris's accounts. But at the same time, if Flutter is technically keeping Chris out of trouble, then that's something to be grateful for, because at the end of the day, we don't really want Chris to accumulate any more debt or to get into any more trouble. That's pretty obvious. But Chris should it's not other people's responsibility. It should be Chris's. But that's only true in the case that, well, Chris has no causes for change. And when you come across a person who has no cause or no real motivation to change whatsoever, how do we expect this is going to happen? I don't know, and well, we'll probably find out when it's too late anyway. Yeah. Anyway, with all that being said and done, I hope all of you guys enjoyed this article, and I hope you learned something from this. They say every defeat is a victory as long as you learn from it. Well, not this one. This one was just about the fact that despite Chris getting into debt that is literally making me sweat, it doesn't really seem to bother him whatsoever. And I'll see all of you guys again next time. So take care, and bye-bye for now.